Hi, I'm Greg, and I worked on this show, Promised Land, in the late 1990s. It was on the CBS television network for 3 seasons. And what you're about to watch with me is the first episode that aired after the pilot episode. The pilot episode aired as a Touched by an Angel episode on a Sunday night in September of 1996. And then this episode aired just 2 nights later on Tuesday as the series premiere of Promised Land. Normally they would have had what they call a cold open, or a scene that comes up before the opening titles sequence that you're watching now. But this time, and this might have been the only time, that they started with the opening title sequence before any other scenes, and they just picked it up from there. So actually, when this was broadcast, this was the first time any of us on the crew had seen the little montage that they put together as the opening title sequence, and it contains some stuff that, from the episodes that we had shot up to that point. We had shot about 5 episodes, or maybe working on our 6th one by the time this was airing. But anyway, what you're seeing right now is supposed to be Fairfield, Colorado, but it's actually a piece of Interstate 84 south of Ogden, Utah. Hey, that was my hand, that little insert shot changing the station on the radio. That was my hand. I was a photo double for that. The reason they didn't do it with Gerald McRaney's hand while they were shooting all this other stuff was they actually had 2 of these Chevy Suburbans that were made to look alike, and but they weren't exactly identical on the inside, and they didn't have the same radio. So on the day they were filming all this other stuff with the cast riding around in the Suburban, apparently they didn't have the one with the radio that they wanted for that shot. So a few days later, we shot it with me, and I just kind of put on the shirt, and we just took a couple of camera guys out to the Suburban behind a building where we were working that day, and we got that shot. Yeah, so Interstate 84, this is south of Ogden, in between Weber Canyon and Riverdale Road. So this is actually just north of Hill Air Force Base, kind of northeast of Hill Air Force Base, in that area there. And they're actually going in a couple different directions while they're filming all this stuff. They kind of just kept going back and forth on this stretch of interstate for a few miles to get the different shots that you're seeing here. There's a lot of continuity errors if you look closely. Looking out the window, lots of trees in the background on one shot, and then the next shot, maybe not as many trees. Or, there's Wendy's character in the front seat, and then they cut to Dinah's character right behind her in the back seat, and the background between those 2 shots could be completely different. But anyway, what is happening in this scene is they're passing through this town, and they turn on the radio, and they hear the DJ reading a letter to the editor of the local newspaper. And the letter is from a guy who's so proud that he's gotten his citizenship, and it sounds like a really positive, patriotic letter about America, but the punchline, the twist in the letter is he says he can't wait to move to his new home in New Zealand. He's leaving America behind. America's a mess. He hates it. He's leaving. And then 2 people call up to comment right after that, agreeing with that letter. So, of course, Russell says, what? No, he's just gone through a little epiphany himself and deciding that, America is worth saving. And so he decides he's going to turn around, stop in this town, try and figure out who this guy was, talk some sense into him, and try and help him understand how great America is, and don't abandon it. Don't run away to New Zealand, because you belong in America. So that's the premise of the episode, and the network officials and the producers and everybody involved decided that really captured the essence of what the Promised Land show was all about. So even though this was the 3rd episode that we shot after the pilot episode, they decided it should be the first episode to air after the pilot episode. And so that's what happened. Right here, the scene we're showing here was filmed in Ogden, Utah. And this is a place called Stimson's, I believe it is, gas station, convenience store, grocery store, kind of a place. So we spent, like half a day filming these scenes there. And I believe this place might be closed by now. I'm recording this commentary in January 2015. So I don't think this place is there in business. I think the building is still there, though, in Ogden. At the time, nice little convenience store gas station. And you saw earlier in the shot there, one of the earlier shots in the scene, the gas price at the time was $1.43.9. I think that really was the real price of gas. Just before this, you saw a little leftover shot from the pilot episode of the Suburban just driving around. But right now, what you're seeing is a scene we shot at a campground. I think it's called Camp VIP. It's on North Temple Street, just a mile or two from downtown Salt Lake City. So it's a unique little KOA campground that's actually very close to a lot of suburban and urban type stuff. We filled this campground, or at least a lot of the stuff that you can see nearby this campsite is actually people we hired. So, tents that were provided by our art department and extras that were hired to be in the show. And so we would often have even crew members, if they happen to have a camper, they might bring a camper to work on days like this. And that way, we got to control those vehicles. And they'd give the crew members that brought a vehicle to appear in the show, they'd give them an extra $10 or $15 or something, to just park their vehicle there in the shot throughout the day and maybe move it if it needed to be moved. So it was kind of nice for the crew members to be able to provide that without a lot of effort and just get a little bump in pay. And also, again, to allow the control that you would want for your backgrounds. So, all right. So here they've discussed, Claire and Russell, that they're going to go out and see if they can find the guy who wrote the letter to the editor and help him out. And Russell says, hey, you don't have to do this with me if you don't want to. And Claire says, no, it's okay, but promise me that when we leave this town, I'm driving. I get to decide where to go. All right. So now we're at a place in South Salt Lake. And I believe this is the Columbus School. My memory's a little cloudy, but I looked it up on the map, and the only place that seems to still look like this is what was once the Columbus School. Now it's called the Columbus Library. It's part of the Salt Lake County Library System. At the time, it was a real school that had been closed. And for a little while, the school district maybe didn't know exactly what to do with the place, so it was just used for storage and stuff. And of course, it's always nice for us that want to make movies and TV shows, if there's a place like this, a school, a hospital, a store, someplace that's closed, but still has everything that it needs to look like an operating school or hospital or store or whatever. So it was great for us to have this school fully intact. Looks like a school. All we had to do was turn on the lights and maybe, put some trophies in the trophy case and hang a few pictures around, and it looks like a fully operational school. Or in this case, a community center, community youth center is what it was supposed to be in this episode. So there we had it. Now, in real life, again, at the time when we filmed this in August of 1996, this place was closed, and we had the run of the place. We could kind of do what we wanted to do on whatever schedule we needed to have. And then within a couple of years after we shot this, ownership changed hands or something, and eventually it did end up in the hands of the county library system. And today, in 2015, it really is a community center and library. And this scene here takes place in one of the rooms that's in this same building. So that's nice, again, to have a place that, again, we just fill it up with furniture and books, and looks like an authentic office for a youth center. As far as the plot at this point in the story, when they stopped at that gas station earlier, Dinah was admiring herself in a mirror, or actually not admiring herself. She thought her legs looked fat. And so they're kind of playing with the idea that there's a self-esteem problem here with a young teenage girl. And so they decided that here at the youth center, they were going to sign her up for a interpretive dance class. And now this woman is explaining to them that the dance class was canceled because the person who was going to volunteer to teach the class dropped out at the last minute. And this is where Hattie, the grandmother, says, you know what? I'll volunteer to teach the class. And then they say, well, do you know something about interpretive dance? She says, I'm the queen of interpretive dance. So she decides, she's going to teach the class. And Dinah is, of course, totally embarrassed that her grandma is going to teach this dance class. She's going to go to the dance class. And so these are some of the things they're setting up in the story points here. Now, you saw earlier an actor, Michael Gross, and here he is again, and he's the coach of these boys that are learning how to play basketball. And so Michael Gross, best known probably as playing the father of Alex Keaton on the show Family Ties in the 1980s. And Alex Keaton, of course, was played by Michael J. Fox, who is best known for not just Family Ties, but also he played Marty McFly in the Back to the Future movies. So here's Michael Gross, the actor, playing a character, and the character's name is Greg Smith, which is interesting because there is an actor called Gregory Smith who was one of the stars of the show Everwood, which happened a few years after Promised Land was made. And Everwood was a lot of the crew members who are on Promised Land eventually ended up working on the Everwood crew after the Promised Land show was over. So Greg Smith, the character in this show, nothing to do with the actor Gregory Smith, except that, like I said, Promised Land crew was involved with the Everwood show. In fact, what you're seeing right here is supposed to be a newspaper office. They've gone to the newspaper office to try and figure out who wrote that letter to the editor. It was an anonymous letter, and so they're trying to find out who it was. And they're talking with the editor of the newspaper, and she says, I don't know who it is, but if you want to look for him, be my guest. Now, this is not a real newspaper office. This is a set that was built on a soundstage. And the soundstage we used almost all the time on the Promised Land show was a converted warehouse on the southwest side of Salt Lake City. And so this particular warehouse was also attached to some office space, and that's where all the Promised Land office staff worked there in Salt Lake City. So this particular building that had the office space and the warehouse that we used as our soundstage, later, after Promised Land was no longer in production, that same building was used to house a show called Cover Me, which was on the USA Network in like 1999 or 2000. And then after that, after Cover Me was over, that same building and those offices were the home of the Everwood show that was shot for 4 seasons there in Salt Lake City. And then eventually, even after that, most recently, that same warehouse studio space was used for a show called Granite Flats, which is produced by BYU Broadcasting, and it's on BYU television. So, and a lot of the, again, Promised Land crew members were involved in all of those shows. What you're seeing right now is supposed to be the outside of the newspaper office, and it's on the west side of Salt Lake City, not too close to where we built the interior sets.